Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We are really excited to have such a fantastic group with us this afternoon. My name is Jessica Gibson, and I am a career development coach in the Career Center here at the University of South Carolina. And I work very closely with Shirisha Mudanuri, who's on the call with us this afternoon, supporting students in the College of Information and Communications. And we have assembled a fantastic panel for you this afternoon. I'm so excited that we have so many students to join us to learn a little bit more about career opportunities in journalism and broadcast. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and we will get going with some questions here for them this afternoon. The folks that are on the call, this session is being recorded because we know many of your colleagues might not have been able to join us live, and so we want to share this fantastic information with them later. Please feel free to put any questions or messages or thoughts that you have that come up as we go along this afternoon in the chat, and we'll get to those questions as we move along. But certainly I'll be keeping track of our time here today, and we will leave plenty of time here at the end. So students, you can feel free to unmute yourselves, put yourself on camera if that's something you're comfortable with, and ask questions of the panelists yourselves. I'm sure they would love to connect with you face to face, even in this virtual environment. Okay, so we are honored to have three outstanding professionals in the field of journalism with us this afternoon to share their experiences. Nina Brook, a native of Atlanta. Brook began her work in newspapers as a student at Georgia State University, where she was editor of the student newspaper and covered prep sports on weekends for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. After college, she worked as a newspaper reporter in Macon, Georgia, St. Paul, Minnesota, and Columbia, South Carolina, focusing primarily on state and local government issues. At the state in Columbia, Brook was Camden bureau chief, a state house reporter, and an associate editor on the editorial page. At WIS-TV, the NBC affiliate in Columbia, Brook covered state government and politics. Brook has worked in public relations and the community relations division of the Science Museum of Minnesota and is press secretary to former South Carolina Governor Jim Hodges. Brook is a familiar face to many as a current instructor in the College of Information and Communications. Welcome, Nina. Thank you for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Cleopatra Shabazz is a South Carolina native who graduated from the University of South Carolina with a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism on May 11th, 2019. The following year, she moved to Connecticut to begin her full-time career as a production assistant at ESPN. Within 2 years, Cleopatra worked her way up to achieve her current role as an associate producer in the ESPN International and Deportes Live Event Department. Welcome, Cleopatra.
Thank you for having me.
And last but certainly not least, we have with us this afternoon Avery Wilkes, a Columbia-based investigative reporter for the Post and Courier, South Carolina's largest newspaper. The Chester native has covered politics, the State House, courts, and a host of other beats since graduating USC's Honors College in 2015. He has won more than a dozen state and national awards for his investigative journalism, including South Carolina Journalist of the Year in 2018. Welcome, Avery. We're glad to have you with us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
There he is. All right, so to get us started this afternoon, since we are hosting this panel for our college students, I want to take you all back a few years to your college experience. And I would love for each of you to share a little bit about your projected career path in college. What did that look like for you? And what might have changed or what has stayed the same since that time?
Who do we want to start with?
I say, Avery, I see your face. So why don't you go first since you're unmuted?
Okay, sure. So I got into college thinking I was going to be a sports writer. I wanted to cover an NFL team or a college football team, or potentially be, a magazine writer, covering sports all over the country. Um, and life happens, and got to college and I actually did that for 4 years and realized I didn't want to do that. And that I got a sort of a taste for hard news reporting, and certainly a taste for not wanting to work 24/7, 365 like you have to do as a sports writer, but wanting to have more of a regular schedule. Yeah, I sort of got a little bit. I dabbled a little bit in news reporting, and I freelanced some for some local newspapers in South Carolina while I was at the J School, and that gave me a sense of sort of the possibilities that could be there if I left sports and tried something else. So basically, as soon as I graduated college, I went into news and have never looked back, and I'm really enjoying what I'm doing.
I'll go next. So my initial career path was to be a sports reporter, mainly because being from South Carolina, I just grew up a natural Gamecocks fan. So coming to USC, getting that acceptance letter, and joining student Gamecock television, the Daily Gamecock, working to senior semester, covering the men's and women's basketball team, tennis, a little bit of football here and there. I just figured it was in the cards for me to be a sports reporter. But I ended up, after senior semester, my last semester, I took an internship at WIS as a sports intern. And I didn't really realize how much goes into, being a reporter, covering those games on a regular basis, all the filming, the editing, the stand-ups, everything you're doing simultaneously. After a while, it kind of overwhelmed me a little bit. So I knew I still like sports though. So I was like, well, maybe if I work in production, maybe if I just, start like with editing or something like that, maybe those skills over time could grow. So I remember I was into my second internship as a video editor, and I saw ESPN had posted this new Next program. And basically that program was full-time, 18-month program for undergrads, fresh out of college. You get into production, you work in multiple departments, and you get a feel for what it's really like being behind the scenes, editing, working with the producer and whatnot. And that's when I realized, this is what I was meant to do. So it was always sports, but it just, I just wasn't meant to be in front of the camera. And it didn't mean I had a bad personality or anything. It's just, I just tended to work better behind the scenes of it all.
That's so interesting, because that is, being in front of the camera is its own thing, right? I knew I didn't want to do that in college. I wanted to work for newspapers. And one of the things I liked was, as a newspaper reporter, you get your little notepad and you go in and, you can listen and observe and everything and be anonymous in a lot of ways, which was great. And, Avery mentioned life happened, and Cleopatra, you've talked about how you had to adjust. And I remember we were at the college paper late in my college career, and we were all sitting around talking about our jobs. And I was the only person who was going into newspapers. And what had happened was, my dream had been to cover politics for the Atlanta paper. The Atlanta paper is at the legislature every day. And, and when I applied, they said, we don't have to hire people from Georgia. We're able to hire people from New York and Boston. And so my professors had an in with the Macon newspaper in central Georgia. And I wanted to cover politics, and I wanted to work for a newspaper, and I moved myself 90 miles south to Macon. And I've never been sorry I did that. I got on with a big, great newspaper chain, and I did what I wanted to do. And, my friends from the newspaper staff went into things like processing checks or insurance or whatever. And so I think if it really is your dream, you gotta, be willing to do what it takes to get to work in your dream.
Thank you all so much for sharing. I really appreciate your honesty in that. I think so many times we think that, oh, well, this is what I want to do, or that our career paths will be fairly linear. And so, Cleopatra and Avery, I appreciate you sharing that your career path has taken some turns. And Nina, I know we'll get into this a little bit later with some of the different things that you have done. So I appreciate y'all's honesty there. So let's bring it a little bit more forward to what your life is like today in your current role. So I would love for students to be able to start to paint a picture in their minds of what your day-to-day looks like, those job responsibilities, things that might pop up, challenges, things that excite you on a daily basis.
I'll go first, just in the interest of continuity here. So I juggle a lot of things. I'm constantly working on different types of stories. I might write one story a month, 1 month, and then the next story I'm writing, 3 or 4 a week. And that kind of goes with the territory as a projects reporter working in a bureau. I've got certain areas of expertise. I've covered the state house. I've covered politics. I like to think I'm good at covering court. I've been doing this job for long enough that I've learned a little bit about a lot of different things. So any given day on this job can be totally different from the last and from the next one. And often what I'm doing is, in the morning, I might be making headway on, a story that's going to run on Sunday. And then in the afternoon, news breaks, and I have to jump on that and write a story for the next day. And then once I'm done with that, I might have an hour or 2 hours to work on a project that might not publish until December. So it's a lot of multitasking. It's a lot of juggling. It's a lot of just trying to be as productive as you possibly can.
I will say I too am a juggler. It is definitely a lot of work behind the scenes, like more so than people realize. Since I work on the live event side, every production pretty much has what's called a prep day. The producer has a Zoom meeting with everyone. He says, okay, this is who we have in the media room. This is who we have on graphics. This is the content we want. So I'll say since the Super Bowl's coming up, we'll say for a Monday Night Football production, I would come in every NFL Sunday. I come in around 1 o'clock. And I'm pretty much watching every game while I'm also editing simultaneously. So a lot of times the producers say, like, if it's the Steelers versus, the Browns, you want like a player package, Ben Roethlisberger, TJ Watt, and other players and whatnot. And basically, while I'm editing, I'm also doing a lot of research. And so we have what's called a stats and information group at work. So that way, if we're looking at like key stats or key records that maybe we need to include in the show, or maybe we need to anticipate, we're doing research in advance and of course the day of. So I put all these videos together the day before. The day of, I come in early, make sure all those videos are edited or on the server, ready to go. And then we're pretty much editing the whole event. Pre-game, it's warm-ups, it's arrivals, it's fan shots, arena shots. The game starts, it's editing for highlight, it's touchdown packages, it's player packages, it's, if somebody sacks somebody a lot of time, basically it's a lot of editing that goes on and a lot of communication. And then at this point, my role as associate producer in our department, we also have to be what's called an associate director. So if I'm not on the editing side, I'm pretty much coordinating everything. So I'm doing mic checks with the talent. I'm making sure we have the right camera angles, the right feed, counting everybody in and out of breaks, counting the clips, making sure, the clips don't freeze on air. So every day is definitely different. And some days are longer than others, depending on the sport.
So what you hear them talk about really got me ready for what I do now, which is great. Obviously my life now is completely different from day-to-day life as a journalist. I'm getting ready for all of the students. And I do sometimes think to myself, it's like showtime when I have a class, or it's like a story that I have to have ready and I have to communicate it well. And a lot of times I think teaching and journalism are so related in the skills that you need to use. And what I would say to students about that is, if you have a dream of doing what Cleopatra or Avery do, then you need to go do that now, right? Do that right out of school. Take the journalism classes, do senior semester, get your internship, get your job in journalism. Because you get all these great skills that if you do decide later that you wanted to do something else, they like what you get as a journalist. And just candidly, it would be, if I decided today I wanted to be a journalist without the 20 years of experience I have, I don't know that I could get on somewhere. So if journalism is your dream, the number one thing I would say is go do that first, and it will serve you well if you decide later that you want to make a switch.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you for sharing. I think definitely probably not even a fair question to say, like, what is a day in your life like, right? I mean, like, there's what is a normal day? I think everyone's going to do a bit of juggling, and certainly in the fields that we're talking about, lots of exciting things that happen from day to day. Nina, I'm going to go back to you because what you were talking about, I really do think segues into a question that I specifically wanted to ask you, because you have done different things within the field of journalism and served in various capacities. So what advice do you have for students to stand out initially? So somewhat of what you already talked about, but then also to have longevity in the field. What does that take? What does that look like?
It takes hard work. I mean, that is the number one thing I would say. And I'll just tell you right now, I was not necessarily always considered the most glamorous person anywhere I worked, and maybe the star power sometimes. But I often think when people needed something done, a face that would come to them was mine, because they knew I'd be there, I'd be on time, I'd find out what I was supposed to do. I would ask the right questions, but not 7 million stupid questions. And I would get out and get it done. And I've always been willing to do some kinds of extra work, even if I didn't necessarily get paid for it. People will say, oh, why are you staying late? Or why are you taking on this extra role? Or why are you, they're going to take advantage of you. And there's a line, right? Like, I don't believe in unpaid work that ought to be paid. I don't believe in paying people less than they should be paid or less than other people are paid because of dumb differences in, their characteristics. But I also know that I just think hard work has served me well anywhere I've gone. And every time I leave somewhere, they always say, if you ever want to come back, you call us, you let us know. And so I think leaving places on good terms and thought of as a contributor helps. And the last thing I'll say, it's funny, I ran into a publisher of the state newspaper who was publisher after I left the state. And he said, oh, I'm so glad I met you, because I'll always be saying, well, we should do this. And someone will say to me, oh, well, Nina used to do that. And, like, she's gone, so we just don't do that anymore. And so I just think you want to be known as a can-do person that's going to get work done and maybe get a little extra done too.
Absolutely. And that speaks to those transferable skills that are going to serve you well, no matter what role you're in. Those technical skills are going to be really, really important, but those transferable skills that you're speaking of are truly, truly irreplaceable. So I know we might not want to talk about the pandemic, but I do think it is important, unfortunately, still to bring it up, because it does continue to influence and affect our lives and the way we live and the way we work. And as students are thinking about taking on internships, moving into the summer, or graduating into the fields that you're going into, I do think there's some value for them to hear from you about how the pandemic has continued to affect or influence the work that you do.
I can go and just say that, for one, I cover it a lot now. And, we've all had to become health reporters if we weren't already in the past 2 years of working in news. Two, I work almost completely remotely. I try to find excuses to go out into the field and cover court or interview people or things like that. Some of that's more difficult now. It's not as easy to just say, hey, let's meet somewhere, or let me swing by your house or something like that, because at the last minute they might say, hey, I was just exposed to COVID, or I have COVID, or I'm uncomfortable with that. With the internship thing, it's especially difficult because I think a lot of the value of internships comes with getting to be in a newsroom and getting to learn from people around you, and learning through osmosis. And if you are interning at a place that is fully remote, you may not get to do that. I mean, you still may get to work with great editors, great reporters, and but you may need to be more picky and choosy about what things that you decide to do. I would still apply everywhere, but if you have options, you may want to choose the one that, if you're comfortable with it, allows you to be more in person, or choose the one that that fits your needs the most. But it's just added another sort of wrench in the process, and another thing for people to think about as they decide their summer plans.
Yeah, I'll definitely say the only genuine pro that really came out of the pandemic was just having opportunities to work remotely in terms of like prep days, because when I started January 2020, that was 2 months before the shutdown, and pretty much there was no such thing as doing any form of work from home. You had to be there every day. ESPN was crowded with 10 billion people, as you would expect, and it's just, you're new, you're thrown in, it's wintertime, it's snowing, and you're just like, what is going on? And then everything just shuts down. So by the time, I kind of came back to physically going into work and sports were coming back, I'd say the dynamic of things change. Downside, you kind of forget people, like you kind of forget their names, like, or you forget their faces because everyone's wearing a mask and you're trying to memorize eyeballs and hair can change, people can put contacts in their eyes. I don't know. So it definitely made it trickier trying to relearn, okay, who am I working with? Who's on my team? And then on top of that, we did have furloughs at one point. We had layoffs at one point because financially it was just hard on a lot of companies. So you can know somebody and then all of a sudden, that person's gone. Maybe they come back months later, maybe you never see them again, you don't know. So it was kind of tricky trying to like memorize, okay, who did I meet in January? Are they still here? Who's not here? Is this person still in charge of this department? And then I'd say like, another thing that's really tricky is working on remote events. Like even though I'm on the live event side, I haven't really had the privilege of doing a remote event, like literally traveling somewhere because of the restrictions. So like, I think in the past, before I started working there, our whole department would go cover the Super Bowl, wherever it was, production truck, everything, the whole 9 yards. Now they may send 1 or 2 people and everything's, housed out of Bristol, which is good, for technology purposes. Cause like, okay, we don't have to physically be everywhere, but at the same time, if your goal is to one day, be in that arena, like an actual NFL arena or like the US Open or something, or you want to go to the Olympics, those chances, unfortunately, of physically being there are just slimmer because we just don't know how long, this COVID nonsense is going to last, unfortunately. But I will say those remote days, when it's snowing, when it's cold, I am grateful to work from home on those days.
I think we've all learned remote work can be great. I have loved it. I have told some of my students at times, though, like, time to get your college muscle back, time to start coming to class again and everything. And, with what Cleopatra was saying, y'all have probably seen this news, but NBC is sending just like a handful of on-camera people to the Winter Olympics. And so is that, and, some of that is politics. So that's not all the pandemic, but it's economics, which she mentioned too. And so are all those in-person opportunities going to come back? I don't know that they're ever going to come back in the numbers or percentage or size that they were. So I don't know about you, just from what I've seen from her now, if I could, I'd send Cleopatra out in the field somewhere. I'd trust her, And so I think you want to be that. You want to be the person, if your dream is to be in the arena, that when they do pick those few, you get picked.
Thank you all for being so honest and acknowledging some of the realities of your field right now. I think that's really, really important to consider. Cleopatra, I'm going to come back to you and ask you a very specific question, because I know we have a growing number of students that are interested in working in sports media, probably some on the call here today. College has introduced a sports media concentration to help prepare students for work in that field specifically. What advice do you have for students that want to go in that direction, knowing that it is a very competitive field, and especially with some of what you just shared? What worked for you? What have you seen that's worked for others?
I say the biggest thing is just finding your niche. The tricky thing about sports is that it's not about who can quote the most stats, who knows of all the big star players in the NBA. It's not really about sputtering like whatever knowledge you have in your brain. It's really about how creative you can be in your work. My niche is like super specific because I chose the minor in Spanish. I had been studying since high school And if I include up to this year, it would be 10 decades, not 10 decades, 10 years worth, a decade of knowledge that went into learning Spanish. So I figured, baseball wasn't my strong sport. I didn't really grow up watching it, but I was like, if I want to make myself stand out and I want to show that I have enough adequate baseball knowledge to kind of, know the big three, the football, the basketball, the baseball, and just, learn the knowledge over time, I just kind of had to find something that could showcase that skill. So what I ended up doing, I remember it was a sports journalism class that I took with Dr. Hull, and we had to do an assignment on the Columbia Fireflies. And I couldn't really tell you baseball stats. I didn't know much about RBIs and all those other things at the time. So what I ended up doing was I did a story on the Fireflies Hispanic Fan Engagement Initiative project that they were doing instead. So that story gave me more creativity, because instead of focusing on, okay, baseball stats, this player is good, this player is bad, it's, oh, we have this growing Hispanic population in Colombia. On top of that, we have these players from Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, coming in as young as 18 years old, not even knowing English, and leaving their family behind just to play baseball in hopes of being in the minors in the majors one day, because they're starting out in the minors. So it was a story that was just so specific to say, hey, some of these interviews aren't even in English. Hey, I got, these pictures, I got the sound, like the feeling, and I wrote this story. So even though I went into broadcast, that's one of the reasons I like that I went into the Daily Gamecock as well, because being able to say, hey, I don't just, film things and just edit, I can write and I can make you feel like you're there. That was just that story that kind of gave me that oomph that said, I know enough baseball, but I really know this language. And that just, at that point, it was, I'm not even trying to be in the Sports Center and all these big departments and these big shows everybody want. If you put me in a department where I don't even use my first language on a regular basis, I think I can do it, and it worked out. But everybody's not studying foreign language. So I know that's like a very specific niche, but honestly, if you're good at something, if you like something, if you're really knowledgeable about something that can really, show your sports skills without being, cookie cutter like everybody else, do it. Like really find that niche that just really makes you stand out and own it.
Playing to your strengths and your interests. That's fantastic advice. Thank you for sharing that. Avery, I've got a specific question for you now. So as an investigative journalist, I know you shared earlier, you cover a wide range of topics. So you could, be spending a month working on a piece and then have to go work on breaking news. But you often have to cover controversial topics. And certainly we live in a world today where people are often on different sides of such topics. Just like a quick list of some of your more recent work. You've done reporting on the state's abuses with the electric co-ops, legislative policies, the Capitol riots. How do you approach topics like this? And what advice do you have for students that are hoping to follow in your footsteps and do investigative journalism? What does that take?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just trying to become an expert in that field as quickly as possible, and to learn. I think it's important that you understand something as a reporter really, really well, so that not only do you know it, but you know how to explain it to yourself a month ago or anyone else who is just reading about this for the first time. So, that involves a lot of research. I know probably the average person reads the paper and they see these articles that are 20 or 30 inches long, and they think, okay, that's what the reporter knows. But in reality, the reporter, that may be 10% of what they have, and they're actually, an expert on that topic, and they've talked to tons of people, and, only the tiny slice of it actually gets included in the story, but they've done that groundwork to know what they're talking about. I think that's really crucial, especially when you're talking about controversial topics. Especially when you're writing about important people and powerful people. You can't afford to go into one of these situations and not know what you're doing. So it's important to do that groundwork and to really be on top of things before you publish.
Great, thank you so much for sharing that really helpful advice with our students. We're going to keep with the vein of advice. So I know we probably have a number of students on the call this afternoon that are in the process of looking for summer internship opportunities, or that graduation might be right around the corner, and they're starting that first, that full-time job search. So what advice do each of you have for students that are approaching that internship and full-time job search right now?
I can just say apply everywhere, and early and often. Give yourself as many options as possible when it comes time for you to make a decision. And try to keep climbing that ladder. If you get a good internship after your sophomore year, your junior summer, you should be going somewhere bigger, somewhere better, somewhere farther away potentially. But essentially, by the time you graduate, you want to be able to say, I've been to all these places, I've tried all these different things, I've learned all these different skills, and just be able to have work that you can show them that proves that you're ready to work on day one. And also within your internship, I would advise you to try to diversify what you're learning. Every internship I did, I tried to bounce around and work on the sports desk one week, or on the copy desk the next week, or taking photos, or doing video, or podcasts. I mean, whatever skills there are available to you to learn in an internship, just don't get pigeonholed in just learning one thing. Try to get as much as you can out of it.
Yeah, you definitely have to apply any and everywhere. Seriously, because like there's just so many opportunities out there. And I would just say, keep that resume up to date. Like Avery said, like you have to have your portfolio ready. It's like you be ready so that way you don't have to get ready when the time comes. And just search anything. Like you don't just find opportunities on LinkedIn, or I know like there's Handshake available, there's Indeed. I've seen opportunities on Twitter as well. Like when I discovered the Next program, it was actually first discovered by a tweet by the ESPN account saying, hey, we just launched this program, dropping a link, stay tuned. And I was like, I didn't think I was going to find a job opportunity on Twitter because I was checking LinkedIn and everything else. But seriously, keep your eyes peeled and just build your stock. Like you seriously have to. And don't even think about where it is or what it is. Like I know internships, like depending on if they're paid or not paid and the location, I know that's a big factor. I'll say as far as like a job, really seriously, don't think about where it is, because you don't know what opportunities in store for you. And like I thought I was going to be in the South my whole life, and I'm here in Connecticut and it's been 2 years. I'm not a big fan of the snow, but I'm working hard, you know what I'm saying? So don't tell yourself, oh, I can only work in LA or I can only work here. Like every place has its pros and cons. You got to work. So just apply so you can get that work.
So number one, if you're not in touch with Shreesha, you need to be. Like if she's got a emailing list, you need to be on it. You need to follow her on Twitter, because I am constantly amazed at the cool things she is putting out there, real leads on real internships and jobs. I love that she said, don't limit yourself on location. So I'm at the age where, my nieces and nephews and children are doing this whole thing. And my nephew had an opportunity to interview in Madison, Wisconsin or Greenville, South Carolina. And he's like, but I just only want to do Greenville. And all of us were like, no, go do the interview in Madison, because you never know who you're going to meet or what you're going to learn or what you're going to find out. And then I would also say, okay, of internships, you really should either be getting paid or you should be getting academic credit, one or the other. Okay, so look out for people that just want you to give them some free labor. It can be okay, but I'd be careful about that. And even for your first job now, I think Cleopatra, maybe you said this, even now, first jobs are often internships, or they're a contract position. They're like 1 or 2 years with media. And that can be scary. I want a permanent job. I don't want just a 1-year job with NPR or whatever. And a friend of mine's daughter out of Clemson did, like it was a 1 or 2 year thing with NPR. And when Brexit came, they sent her over there. She was over there cutting all the audio all night long to run the next morning on Morning Edition or whatever it is on NPR for Brexit, all because she was willing to take a chance on a temporary job. So internships, I don't really know how you'd get a good permanent job in media without a real internship, without what Avery was talking about, actual product to show them. that you've done. And school projects are great. Senior semester is great because it's like an internship. But you really, really, really need that work product to show them to get a job.
Fantastic advice, all of you. I'm learning so much from y'all here today too. I hope students are taking good notes and taking this information down. What has been the most surprising aspect of working in journalism for you? Because I know sometimes like we have this idea of what it's going to be like, right? You talked about having experiences. Once you were actually there working full time, what surprised you the most?
I definitely say it feels like an orchestra to me. Like just the whole setup of live event. I seriously didn't realize how many moving parts go into putting together a production. Seriously. So when I got into it, I didn't realize, like, when I say that it's so many moving parts, basically the setup for every event, we have a control room, an audio room, and a media room. So in the big control room, you have the producer who's basically calling the shots of how they want the production to be. The associate directors working with them, just making sure they time out the show. You have this technical director. They're making sure the video's good, the music, all the, the video elements are working properly. You have a graphics producer that's, putting out all the stats. And then they're sitting next to an operator who has to make sure, okay, the graphics look good. Is it animating good? Then in the audio room, you have two audio operators because both of them have to hold each other accountable. Is the sound good? Are we getting clean, natural sound? How's the talents mic? How's the music? Is it all flowing? Are the levels okay? And then in the media room, you have like either production assistants and or associate producers editing and or content associates with these operators who are basically like, hey, it has to go on this server. It has to do that. So every job is a big deal. Even if you think it's a small job, like every position is a big deal, because if something goes wrong with the graphics, obviously we can't show people a visual representation of stats. If something goes wrong with the clock and scoreboard, obviously the fans don't even know what quarter win, what's the score, and then if the videos go wrong, and then it's like, okay, well, what do we show? What if our camera angle's acting funky? So it's like everything is so critical, and it's so much communication, more so than just, oh, let me just send this email. No, like we're talking to each other on the radio, on the intercom, and we're just like, get this together. You got this, you got that. And like, you're listening to everybody. It's seriously an orchestra. And at first it's very overwhelming and you have to catch your breath, but eventually you're kind of like, okay, I'm playing my instrument, and we're sound cool and we're even key and everything's okay in a perfect world.
I would say what people are willing to tell you if you just ask was a huge surprise to me. I love people. I love stories. And as a reporter, I had to talk to people who'd been, victims of crime. Their families have been victims of crime. I had to knock on a woman's door who someone had broken out of the nearby jail and gone in her home and tied her up and done all this. And this is when I was at WIS, and the photographer I was working with said, she's not going to talk to us. And I said, we have to ask. I can't go back to the office if I don't ask. And, she let us in and let us record an interview with her and told her story. And for me, at least, being a reporter was not like you see on TV, certainly not like in the movies, and not like you see in these like scrums, with Donald Trump or something where everything's just adversarial and everybody's yelling at everybody. It was usually, even when I was a political reporter, smaller talks with people where I just tried to understand and they tried to help me understand. And then I got to go write that up so that other people could understand. And I just really loved all that relating to people and getting their stories from them.
I tend to agree with what Cleopatra and Nina just said. I mean, I think seeing all of the work that goes into it from the inside for the first time was really eye-opening to me, and sort of the daily miracle of putting together a newspaper or a show or a website. I mean, I think all that's really remarkable. It's hard to say because I feel like I've been doing this for so long, even though 2015 wasn't that long ago. But I really have learned so much, and it's stuff that you can't really fathom until you do it, until you're on the front lines and you sort of see how the sausage is made. So that's one of the reasons that internships are so important.
Y'all just keep offering up such fantastic commentary and insight. And it is almost hard to believe that we are quickly moving almost to 5 o'clock here. So what we're going to do, I'm going to ask our panelists one more question, and then we'll turn it over to the students to ask questions. So students, be getting ready for that. My last question for each of you here this afternoon, what do you see as the future of journalism?
I mean, it's ever changing. It's what I thought the future of journalism was in 2016 is very different from what it could be now. We're seeing a lot of moves toward nonprofit journalism, where people can donate to support a journalist or a journalism outlet. We're seeing a move toward more of a subscription-based model than an ad-based model. I think that's going to continue as Google and Facebook continue to gobble up all the ad revenue that websites used to get. And I think what you'll see is maybe leaner but tougher news outlets who spend more of their time looking into government misconduct or the type of like hard-hitting journalism that people are willing to pay for. I think you're going to see a shift toward that. And that's already ongoing.
Yeah, I would say like I initially thought that the future was just going to be, social media kind of taking over and, putting out content, not just like on television or print, but also putting out content, on social media, Instagram and YouTube and Twitter and everything. But I think what surprised me about the future is more or less like streaming. Because I remember when I was in school, which wasn't that long ago, but it was a lot of people were talking about how people are getting rid of cable. How are people going to watch the news? But then I think what kind of helped the sports industry is they realize, okay, people may get rid of cable, but they want to watch live sports. And it's hard to like find a way to not watch live sports legally. You know what I'm saying? Like you got to watch live sports the right way and with friends. And it's a unifying thing. So I think when the rise of streaming services, I think that caused like a huge transcending to what television could be. It changed it because it's like streaming services, it's still linear in a way. It's still a schedule, it's still an event, but now it's not, oh, do I want a cable package? It's okay, do I want to pay for Hulu to watch all these live sports? Do I want to pay for ESPN Plus to specifically see how they cover certain sports? Like it's changed a lot because even for what I do, there are sports that we work on that aren't always on the linear network. Sometimes we're just doing a game that's airing on Plus. When we got the Spanish La Liga deal, that a lot of those games don't even air linearly. Or if we do air them linearly, sometimes the pregame show's on Plus, the regular games on linear and streaming, but then the post-game show is just, on linear. So it's been very interesting as far as like knowing where your content's going, how you're putting it together. Like it's been very interesting to kind of see that transition from it's not just about cable anymore. You can still get that live event feel on your computer.
So I was at a gathering of political journalists a few years ago, and we went around the room and all told our story. And the person in charge there said, your stories break down into two big categories here. People who talk about journalism as a magic carpet. It takes you places ordinary people don't get to go. You get to be right up front and see and do things that ordinary people don't get to do. And then the second was, it's important work. You get to be a change agent in your community. Maybe you're helping make public schools better. Maybe you're holding public officials accountable for the money that they spend, or businesses for incentives that they're getting in your community or that kind of thing. And that is absolutely still true of journalism today. And what's interesting to me now is I've always felt that communication as a major and as a career is something where you can combine that storytelling, the immersion in it with something that's a huge passion for you, if that's politics or sports or the environment, or some people, healthcare policy would be a huge area for media now and that kind of thing. And so I think it remains something where if you figure out what you love and what you want to be immersed in all day long, away from your family, even if it just means away from them doing your Zoom call, you can do that with journalism. And I would say, for example, just look at the SEC network. I think I saw something recently that said they're going to cover a bunch of women's collegiate gymnastics coming up. Well, who would have ever guessed, that there was going to be a way that not at the Olympics, if you wanted to, you could go and report on and produce and share with the world this sport that so many people are just avid fans of, that wonderful, enthusiastic niche. So there's lots of opportunity, but I think you have to figure out what you love, what you're good at, what you're willing to put the work in for, and then who's going to pay you to do that.
Thank y'all so much for sharing. I'm going to turn it over to our students now. I hope you have some questions for the panelists. You can put something in the chat and I'm happy to ask it. I would also invite you to share your screen or show your video and unmute yourself and ask the question directly if you so choose. This is a great opportunity for you to connect individually with the fantastic folks with us this afternoon. So Dean Reichert has asked a question in the chat. Has the fundamental skill set for journalists changed? If so, how? So whoever wants to answer that one, or if all three of you want to chime in.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like versatility is just the one word to describe it all, because you're not like, even if you're broadcast, even if you're print, whatever it is that you're doing, you're not expected to just be good at that anymore. Like I'll say, like for what I do, it's not just, oh, okay, I want to edit. Like the basis was, okay, I want to edit, I want to work in production, but it evolved into, okay, we see that, you've been doing these videos, but we need you to learn this skill of directing. We need you to communicate with these people. We need you to coordinate. We need you to learn this software. And then even like in most recent weeks, it's been, you know what? We kind of need more people to do graphics. We know you know some Spanish. How about you, just start like start picking up your Spanish and start putting graphics together. It's been a lot of, you can't just be good at one thing. Seriously. I know like in the social media department, a lot of people want to go into social media and they think that it's, oh, I can use my phone. I can go live on Twitter. I could go live on Instagram. It's no big thing. But when I was networking with that department out of curiosity, they were like, the three things you need are Premiere, After Effects, and Photoshop. They're not expecting you to just be a good editor or just a good writer. You can't just be good at one thing. They want you to be good essentially at everything. So it's more than just, picking up that one skill and saying, oh yeah, I'm great at this. They really want to see, can you be an all-around person? And even if you don't know it, are you willing to learn this skill from scratch and be great?
I was just going to say, I fully agree with that. That's exactly what I was going to say.
There's not a lot to add. I think you do need to be a little bit of a Swiss Army knife now. You got to be able to write, take some pictures, edit some things, post it, do it quickly, accurately. My career was this many minutes in beginning of what they all deal with now with the social media world. And, it's just constant. So you got to prioritize and be smart and fresh and creative. It's a lot to carry, but it's fun. It really is fun. And you get a muscle for it. I guarantee you Avery has a muscle for how he tweets when he's working, for what he can and can't say, and it's fun.
Yeah, and I mean, when I first started, like I said, I was a sports reporter pretending to know how to do news at the state when I first began. And, I would get thrown into these situations where I didn't know what the lead of the story should be, what the second sentence. And eventually, you learn from other colleagues who have been doing this longer. you do it enough yourself that now I can bang out a breaking story as quick as anybody. I mean, I've really you do develop that muscle memory, and it does get easier, even though it's very scary at first.
So we have another question that's come through from a freshman broadcasting major that's asking about recommendations, or when would you recommend getting involved with internships? So as a current freshman broadcast major.
I'd do it now. I mean, I think it's important to, and even if it, say the deadline is passed or you need money, like I did, I couldn't just go do an unpaid internship for my first, really any of my years of college. But what you can do is volunteer to help. If you've got a job that's not journalism related in your hometown, after your freshman year, message people at the local newspaper or at the local station or at the local radio show and just say, hey, can I come shadow you? Can I come watch you do what you do? Get your foot in the door, make sure people in your market know you and can either give you a job later or recommend you for a job to someone else. A lot of what I did, even when I wasn't doing journalism internships, because I couldn't get any or couldn't find any or needed more money, was just sort of burning the midnight oil, showing up to sporting events just for myself, getting to know people on the Gamecock athletics beats. Those were relationships I still have today, people that were able to recommend me for jobs. So putting yourself out there is super important, regardless of whether it's a formal internship or something else.
We last year at this panel, we had a TV news director on, and he suggested that students get your phone and go out once a week or every week, and you report, shoot, and edit a news story about something going on in your community. And you have that ready on your portfolio or whatever. And it sounds like, but really, if you did that, then when an internship came up and you could show them that little reel of yours of stories you had written and edited, that would put you ahead. I definitely would commend working on the Daily Gamecock to you, even though you're thinking about broadcast. SGTV is good too, and maybe Cleopatra could talk to her about her experience. But I think that with the more news-based, fully news-based operation that's the Daily Gamecock, you would work that muscle of interviewing people, writing real stories that are seen by real people that will help with internships. And I didn't teach her, and I don't know how this happened, but I just know that Alyssa Lang, who's with the SEC network now, she worked at WLTX TV station here in Columbia while she was still a student. She was working there on the weekends, and I know I had a student that worked at LTX as an intern and that kind of thing. So I think it's possible, and I agree, it is not too soon to start. I mean, you never know. Somebody might take you between your freshman and sophomore year as an intern. And then, boy, would you be in good shape, for the years that follow. And then, of course, absolutely do senior semester. That program is fabulous for getting broadcast reporters ready to go to work.
Yeah, Avery and Nina hit the hammer on the nail, honestly, definitely. And she was right 1,000%, because when I went into broadcast, I initially did SGTV, and I noticed that a lot of people on the sports side, they're filming the games, they're doing the stand-ups, and it's a lot of, just stat-based, oh yeah, they scored this many points, they did this and that. But when I joined the Daily Gamecock, I want to say this was my senior year, and I was simultaneously doing my sports internship at the same time and taking that sports journalism class that I mentioned. I was kind of like in overtime my senior year, trying to make it work. And I remember the writing aspect helped my brain a lot, because a lot of the stories I did weren't just all X's and O's, who won, who lost. A lot of people think that being in this industry, you have to be like, oh yeah, Keyshawn Bryant on the men's basketball team, he had 24 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists. It's not really all about that. A lot of people forget these players are humans, and everybody doesn't want to hear the same stat story. If I want stats, realistically, you can go online, Gamecock Athletic, Gamecock Online, ESPN.com. You can read the whole play-by-play and go to the box score and read those stats. If you're going to write a story, don't throw me stats that I can find online. Give me something that I'm gonna learn about this player. Give me something I'm gonna learn about the team. And so a lot of stories I tried to do was, if I covered like women's tennis, a lot of people didn't go to their games, but I was like, oh, they have the sports science division, and they eat a certain way, they exercise a certain way, they do these things, they have this conditioning. Like, that's the stuff that gets people involved, like not just on the sports side, it's the same way on the news side as well. It's not just let's state the fact, like this is what happened, that what happened. You got to give people that oomph. And I feel like I got more understanding of how to give people that oomph when I was writing about it, because when you write, you're writing as if you're talking to somebody. And a lot of people don't know how to literally talk as if they're talking to somebody on camera until they write, and they have to be like, oh, how do I keep this person reading my story? Then it all clicks.
Well, this afternoon has just been absolutely fantastic. I cannot thank our panelists enough. I know you were all extremely busy, and we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to share this fantastic advice with our students. I think we could probably continue talking for another hour and just keep learning a lot and sharing a lot. But unfortunately, we do have to wrap up this afternoon. Students, a big part of your career success is using your network. And so your network has expanded a little bit today by virtue of being on this call. So I would encourage you to connect with and continue to ask questions of our panelists here this afternoon. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. Sharisha will be sending out a link to the recording for this afternoon for all the participants that were here. So you should be receiving that in your inbox tomorrow afternoon. And we hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank y'all. Thank you
for having us.